The rain didn't just fall. It wept against the cold window pane of the small Brooklyn apartment, mirroring the single tear that traced a path down Annalise Vance's cheek. In one hand, she clutched a small plastic stick with two impossible pink lines, a symbol of a new life. In the other, her phone displayed a glossy society page, a photograph of the man she loved. Tristan Davenport, smiling brilliantly. He wasn't smiling at her. He was smiling at the beautiful raven-haired woman on his arm, Genevieve Beaumont, under a headline that sliced her heart in two. Real estate tycoon Tristan Davenport announces engagement to socialite heiress. He was building a future, a dynasty. And Annalise. She was carrying its forgotten foundation. The air in Annalise's apartment on Carroll Street had always been filled with the scent of turpentine and ambition. Canvases in various states of completion leaned against the exposed brick walls, each a testament to a dream she was meticulously painting into existence. She was an artist not yet famous, but brimming with a talent that had captured the eye of Tristan Davenport, a man who moved through New York City's elite circles like a shark in curated waters. Their romance had felt like a whirlwind masterpiece. He'd discovered her at a small gallery show in Chelsea, buying her entire collection, and in the process her heart. He spoke of a future painted in the vibrant hues of shared dreams of a gallery with her name above the door of a life far removed from her humble beginnings. He loved her passion. He'd set her authenticity in a world of polished veneers. Annalise, who had known only struggle and the solace of her art, had believed him. She had allowed herself to be swept into his world of penthouse views, exclusive parties, and promises whispered in the dark. For 6 months, she lived in that beautiful, intoxicating dream. She ignored the society whispers that always linked his name to Genevieve Beaumont, the daughter of a rival real estate magnate. Tristan had assured her that Genevieve was a business arrangement, a relic of his family's ambitions, not his heart's desire. "You, Annalise," he would murmur, tracing the line of her jaw, "are the real thing. You're my truth." The truth, however, proved to be a fragile and cruel thing. It began to unravel with small, sharp cuts. Cancelled dates for last-minute board meetings, the scent of a foreign expensive perfume on his suit jacket, the way his eyes would glaze over when she spoke of their future, as if he were looking at a ghost. The final shattering blow came not with a confession, but with the cold, impersonal gleam of a society blog post. The engagement announcement. The photograph was taken at the annual Metropolitan Museum of Art Gala, an event he'd told her was a dreadful bore he was being forced to attend alone. Yet there he was, resplendent in a Tom Ford tuxedo, his arm possessively around Genevieve's waist. Her diamond ring was a starburst of cruel light, a supernova that incinerated Annalise's world. Her call to him went to voicemail. And the next, and the next. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. She was about to dial again when the pregnancy test, which she had taken on a whim after 2 weeks of inexplicable fatigue, flashed in her mind. 2 lines. A baby. His baby. A new kind of strength, fierce and protective, surged through her. This wasn't just about her broken heart anymore. She hailed a taxi, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon pain through her tear-filled eyes, and directed the driver to his address, the imposing gray-stone Davenport building on Park Avenue. The doorman, a man who had always greeted her with a warm smile, suddenly looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting away. "I'm sorry, Miss Vance. Mr. Davenport left instructions not to be disturbed." "He'll see me," she said. her voice trembling but firm. She pushed past him, her heart hammering against her ribs with each step she took in the marble-floored lobby. She used the key he'd given her, the one he'd called the key to our future, to access the private elevator. The ride up to the penthouse was a silent, agonizing ascent into the heart of her own destruction. The apartment was breathtakingly silent. It was a museum of wealth, all clean lines, expensive art, and panoramic views of the city that now felt like a billion mocking eyes. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring out at the cityscape. He didn't turn when she entered. "You shouldn't be here, Annalise," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth she cherished. "Why, Tristan? Why wouldn't you tell me?" Her voice broke. "An engagement I had to find out from a gossip column." He finally turned, and the man she saw was a stranger. The loving warmth in his eyes had been replaced by a cold, dismissive calculation. "It was always going to end this way. You knew that." "No," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "You told me you loved me. You said Genevieve was nothing, a business deal." "And you were a beautiful distraction," he said, the words striking her with physical force. "A lovely, passionate escape from my reality. But reality, Annalise, is about legacy, about power. The Davenport-Beaumont merger is worth billions. It secures my family's empire for generations. That is my reality." The world tilted on its axis. Every "I love you," every shared dream had been a lie. She had been an escape. "So that's all I was to you, a distraction." "Don't be so dramatic," he scoffed, taking a sip of his drink. "We had a good time. I was very generous to you." He gestured around the room at the life he had dangled in front of her. The mention of his generosity was a slap in the face. Hot, righteous anger burned through her shock. "Generous, you think buying my paintings and letting me stay in your gilded cage was generous? I gave you my heart, Tristan. I gave you everything." Her hand instinctively went to her stomach. The secret she carried felt like a lead weight. "There's more," she said, her voice barely audible. I'm pregnant." For the first time, a flicker of something surprise, annoyance, maybe even fear crossed his face. He set his glass down with a sharp clink. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant," she repeated louder this time. "It's yours." He stared at her, his face a mask of cold fury. He walked towards her, his presence suddenly menacing. "No," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "No, you're not." "I am. I took a test this morning." "Then you will get rid of it," he stated, as if ordering a meal. There was no discussion, no emotion, just a brutal command. Annalise recoiled as if he'd struck her. "Get rid of it, Tristan. This is our child." "It is a problem," he corrected her, his voice like ice. "It is a complication that I will not have. I am marrying Genevieve in 3 months. My life is set. There is no room in it for you or that." He pointed a dismissive finger at her stomach. That. He had called their child that. The last vestiges of her love for him curdled into ash. As if on cue, the penthouse door opened. Genevieve Beaumont swept in, draped in a Chanel coat, her dark hair a perfect sheet, her red lips curved into a triumphant smirk. She took in the scene, Annalise's tear-streaked face, Tristan's thunderous expression with an air of detached amusement. "Darling," Genevieve said, her voice a silky purr as she glided over to Tristan, ignoring Annalise completely. "I thought you were handling this." "I am," Tristan said, his jaw tight. Genevieve finally deigned to look at Annalise, her eyes raking over her with undisguised contempt. "So this is the little artist," she mused. "Tristan has told me all about your arrangement. I do hope you weren't under any illusions." The word arrangement hung in the air, a final poisonous dart. Annalise looked from Genevieve's smug face to Tristan's cold one. They were a matched set, two sides of the same cruel gilded coin. "He's a liar, Annalise," Genevieve continued, enjoying her victory. "He tells every girl she's the one. It's part of his charm, but in the end he always comes home to where the power is." She languidly touched the enormous diamond on her finger. "And the power is with me." Annalise stood there, stripped bare of her dignity, her love, her future. But as she looked at them, a tiny defiant ember began to glow within her. They saw her as a problem to be erased, a distraction to be discarded. They had no idea who she was. With a final broken sob, she turned and walked away. She didn't look back. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing her off from the life she thought was hers, she made a silent vow to the tiny, unborn life inside her. They would not break her. They would not erase her. This was not her end. It was a brutal, agonizing beginning. The descent in the elevator was a journey through the 9 circles of hell. The polished brass walls reflected a woman Annalise didn't recognize, a ghost with hollow eyes and a shattered soul. When she stumbled out into the lobby, the doorman who had tried to stop her now looked at her with pity, an expression she found more insulting than Tristan's cruelty. She walked out into the relentless New York rain, a fitting baptism for her new desolate reality. The next few weeks were a blur of gray. The city that had once pulsed with promise now felt like a suffocating cage. Tristan's words echoed in her mind. Get rid of it. A problem. That. Each word was a fresh wound. He had not only broken her heart, he had tried to annihilate her very being, to deny the existence of the life they had created. Her art, once her sanctuary, became a source of torment. The canvases that lined her apartment were vibrant with the colors of her love for him. A portrait of him laughing, a landscape of the view from his Hamptons beach house, an abstract piece filled with the passionate reds and deep blues of their nights together. Looking at them was like staring at a collection of beautiful, intricate lies. The phone calls started a few days later. Not from Tristan, but from a man with a clipped professional voice who introduced himself as Arthur Caldwell, Mr. Davenport's personal attorney. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Miss Vance." He began his tone cold and impersonal. "I am calling on behalf of my client to discuss a resolution to your situation." "My situation has a heartbeat." Annalise snapped, her voice raw. Caldwell was unfazed. "Be that as it may, Mr. Davenport is prepared to offer a generous settlement to assist with your medical expenses and subsequent relocation. The sum of $100,000 contingent upon the signing of a non-disclosure agreement and, of course, the termination of the pregnancy." $100,000. The price of her silence and her child's life. The transactional coldness of it stole her breath. They weren't just asking her to have an abortion. They were trying to buy her complicity in erasing every trace of her existence from Tristan's pristine life. "Tell Mr. Davenport," Annalise said, her voice dangerously quiet, "to take his money and go to hell." She hung up before he could respond, her hand shaking with a rage so pure it almost felt cleansing. The offer, however, was a threat in disguise. 2 weeks later, an eviction notice appeared on her door. Her landlord, a man who had always praised her art and been flexible with her rent, was suddenly apologetic but firm. The building had been bought by a new development corporation. All leases were being terminated. A quick search online revealed the truth: the corporation was a subsidiary of Davenport Holdings. Tristan wasn't just casting her out of his life. He was methodically dismantling hers brick by brick. Her world was shrinking. Her savings were dwindling. Morning sickness had become a constant unwelcome companion, making it impossible to take on the freelance graphic design work that paid her bills. The calls from Caldwell became more frequent, his tone more insistent. The offer was increased. 200,000. Then 500. Each call felt like a tightening noose. Her only lifeline was her best friend Fiona Chen, a sharp-witted financial analyst who had been skeptical of Tristan from the start. Fiona arrived at Annalise's half-packed apartment with 2 large pizzas and a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne. She took one look at Annalise's pale face and the boxes surrounding her, and her expression hardened. "He's forcing you out," Fiona stated, not a question, but a fact. Annalise just nodded, tears welling in her eyes for the first time in days. "He's trying to erase me, Fi. He's trying to buy my child's life and then throw me away like garbage." Fiona wrapped her in a fierce hug. "Then we won't let him. We fight." "How?" Annalise whispered into her shoulder. "He's Tristan Davenport. He owns half this city. I'm a broke artist with a baby on the way. He has lawyers and billions. I have a box of eviction notices." They sat on the floor amongst the boxes, and for hours Annalise poured out everything: the cruel dismissal, Genevieve's smug triumph, the lawyer's cold, calculating offers. Fiona listened patiently, her anger simmering beneath a calm, analytical surface. "Okay," Fiona said, finally, pushing a slice of pizza into Annalise's hand. "Eating for 2. Now, remember? Here's what he wants. He wants you to disappear. He expects you to be a victim, to take the money, or to break down and fight him in a public, messy way that he can easily spin to his advantage. He'll paint you as a gold-digging, unstable artist. The media will eat it up, and he and his ice queen will come out looking like the wronged parties." Everything Fiona said was true. It was a game Annalise couldn't win by his rules. "So what do I do?" "You do the one thing he doesn't expect," Fiona said, her eyes gleaming with an idea. "You disappear, but on your own terms, not as a victim running away, but as a survivor making a strategic retreat. You take the one thing he can't control, your talent, and you build a new life somewhere he can't touch you." The idea was terrifying. Leave New York. The city was all she knew. Her friends, her few contacts in the art world, everything was here. "He's offering you $500,000 now, right?" Fiona continued. "It's blood money, I know. It's disgusting. But Annie, look at it differently. It's not a settlement. It's seed money. It's his unwilling investment in your and your baby's future. It's the price he pays for underestimating you." Annalise stared at her friend, a flicker of hope igniting in the ashes of her despair. The thought of taking his money was repulsive, but Fiona was right. It could be a tool, a weapon, a way out. Where would I even go? "London," Fiona said without hesitation. "It's another global art hub, but you can be anonymous there. You have a distant cousin who lives in Brighton, right? You could stay with her for a bit to get on your feet. You can start over. Reinvent yourself. Not as Tristan Davenport's discarded mistress, but as Annalise Vance, a brilliant artist in her own right." The plan was audacious, radical, and it terrified her. But the alternative, staying in New York, fighting a losing battle against a titan, and allowing her child to be born into the shadow of a man who called him a problem, was infinitely more terrifying. The next day, Annalise made a call. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice steady and clear, a stranger to her own ears. "I'll accept the offer, but the amount is $1 million, and the non-disclosure agreement will have a clause that Mr. Davenport is to make no further contact with me or any child I may bear ever again. These are my final terms. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. She had called their bluff. She knew they wanted this to go away quickly and quietly before the high society wedding. Any public scandal would tarnish the Davenport-Beaumont merger. She held her breath, her heart pounding. 2 days later, the money was wired to a new account Fiona had helped her set up. The papers were signed. It felt like selling a piece of her soul, but she knew she was buying her child's future. With the eviction deadline looming, she packed what little she had. She sold most of her furniture, but carefully wrapped her easels, her brushes, and her paints. She couldn't bear to look at the paintings she'd done during her time with Tristan, so she took them to a storage unit, a museum of a life she was leaving behind. All except one. A small, unfinished charcoal sketch of a single resilient wildflower pushing its way through a crack in a city pavement. She packed it carefully. Her last night in New York was spent at Fiona's apartment. They looked out over the glittering skyline, a view that once held so much promise. "Are you scared?" Fiona asked softly. "Terrified," Annalise admitted. "But for the first time in months, I feel like I'm breathing again. He didn't break me, Fee. He just burned away the parts of me that weren't strong enough." The next morning, she boarded a flight to Heathrow. As the plane climbed banking over the Atlantic, she looked down at the sprawling metropolis shrinking below. She didn't feel sorrow. She felt a profound, aching sense of release. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach, a silent promise to the life within. They were leaving the ashes behind. It was time to find out what could grow from the embers. The first year in London was the hardest. The city was a sprawling, indifferent giant, and the anonymity that had seemed so appealing from New York felt crushingly lonely at times. The $1 million, which had sounded like a fortune, dwindled with alarming speed after she secured a small but safe flat in Notting Hill and paid for the best prenatal care she could find. It was a constant, terrifying weight in the back of her mind, a finite resource she had to turn into a future. Her cousin in Brighton offered a welcoming home, but Annalise knew she couldn't rely on her for long. She needed to stand on her own feet for her own sake, and for the babies. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a tuft of her own honey-blonde hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea. Tristan's eyes. She named him Rowan after the resilient mountain ash tree, a symbol of protection and strength. Holding Rowan in her arms for the first time, Annalise felt a love so fierce and absolute it eclipsed all the pain that had come before. He was not a problem or a complication. He was her purpose. Every sacrifice would be for him. With a newborn, her own art had to take a back seat. The smell of turpentine was too strong for the small flat, and finding time for the all-consuming focus painting required was impossible. But she couldn't abandon the art world. It was the only thing she truly knew. So she pivoted. She used her keen eye for talent, honed over years of studying her craft, and started a small online art consultancy. She began by writing a blog, Vance Curations, offering sharp, insightful critiques of emerging artists. She spent Rowan's nap times scouring online galleries, virtual exhibitions, and art school graduation shows looking for undiscovered gems. Her writing was passionate and intelligent, and she slowly built a small following. Her first client was a wealthy tech entrepreneur who wanted to decorate his new Shoreditch office, but had no idea where to start. Annalise spent weeks curating a collection of bold, modern pieces from up-and-coming London artists. She negotiated the prices, oversaw the installation, and transformed a sterile corporate space into a vibrant talking point gallery. He was thrilled and recommended her to his contacts. Slowly, meticulously, she built her business. Vance Curations became known for its impeccable taste and its focus on nurturing new talent. She wasn't just a dealer, she was a kingmaker, discovering artists before they hit the big leagues and connecting them with collectors who appreciated their potential. She worked tirelessly, often late into the night, after putting Rowan to bed, fueled by coffee and an unyielding determination to build a fortress of security around her son. It was through her work, 5 years after arriving in London, that she met Alexander Thorne. He was not just another client. Alexander Thorne was a legend, a reclusive titan of industry who had built a global empire in sustainable technologies. He was older, in his late 40s, with kind, intelligent eyes, silvering temples, and a quiet authority that commanded more respect than Tristan's brash arrogance ever could. He contacted Vance Curations to acquire a series of paintings by a young Scottish artist Annalise had championed on her blog. He didn't send an assistant. He came to her small gallery office himself. He was unassuming, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored suit, and he spoke about art with a genuine passion and knowledge that surprised her. Their professional relationship blossomed. He became her biggest client, trusting her judgment implicitly as she curated collections for his homes in London, Geneva, and Tuscany. Their meetings often turned into long conversations about art life and the world. He was a widower, having lost his wife to cancer years ago, and he spoke of her with a gentle reverence that moved Annalise. Unlike Tristan, who had been captivated by the idea of a passionate, struggling artist, Alexander was captivated by Annalise herself, her intellect, her business acumen, her resilience. He saw the steel beneath her graceful exterior. He also saw the fierce, all-encompassing love she had for her son. He met Rowan one Saturday when he came to her flat to view a new piece. 6-year-old Rowan, with his boundless energy, immediately took a liking to the calm, gentle man who got down on the floor to inspect his Lego castle with the seriousness of an architectural engineer. Annalise watched them, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. For years, she had been a fiercely self-sufficient unit of two. The ease with which Alexander fit into their small world was both unnerving and wonderful. Their relationship evolved slowly, naturally, built on a foundation of mutual respect and deep admiration. He never pushed, never pried into her past, though he knew she was a single mother with a story. He simply accepted her as she was. He courted her not with extravagant gifts, but with thoughtful gestures, a rare art history book he'd found for her, a surprise picnic in Hyde Park with Rowan, his quiet, unwavering presence when she was stressed about a difficult client. He proposed a year later, not with a grand public display, but on a quiet evening in her garden, after they had put a sleeping Rowan to bed. "Annalise," he said, taking her hands in his, "I've spent the last decade building an empire, but my life has been empty of joy. You and Rowan, you are joy. You've filled my world with color and laughter. I'm not asking to replace a past I don't know, but to build a future with you. Will you be my wife?" Annalise had built walls around her heart, so high and thick she thought no one could ever scale them. But Alexander hadn't tried to scale them. He had simply given her the safety and security to open the gate herself. She said yes, tears of pure happiness streaming down her face. Their wedding was an intimate, elegant affair at his estate in the English countryside. Rowan, dashing in a tiny tuxedo, served as the ring-bearer. As Annalise stood beside Alexander exchanging vows under a canopy of ancient oaks, she felt a sense of peace she had never thought possible. Shortly after their honeymoon, Alexander dropped a bombshell. "My love," he said over dinner one evening, "Thorne Industries is finalizing the acquisition of a major competitor in the U.S. The deal requires me to be in New York for at least the next year to oversee the transition. I want you and Rowan to come with me." New York. The name alone sent a jolt of ice through her veins. It was a city that held nothing but ghosts and pain. Sensing her hesitation, Alexander covered her hand with his. "We'll be staying at my penthouse on Central Park West. It's a world away from wherever you were before. You can launch the U.S. branch of Vance Curations. This is a new chapter, Annalise. A chance to write over the old one. We'll face it together." She looked at her husband, this wonderful, solid, loving man. She looked at her son, who was already excited about seeing the skyscrapers he'd only seen in movies. Fiona was right. This wasn't running. This was a strategic advance. She was no longer the broke, terrified artist fleeing in the night. She was returning as Annalise Thorne, a successful businesswoman, a mother, and the wife of one of the most powerful and respected men in the world. "Okay," she said, a new steely resolve hardening her voice. "Let's go to New York." The Phoenix was returning to the city of her ashes, but this time she would be the one controlling the fire. Returning to New York was like stepping into a parallel universe. The city was the same. The relentless symphony of sirens, the canyons of steel and glass, the electric pulse of ambition. But she was profoundly different. Annalise Alexander and a 7-year-old Rowan settled into a sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park. The view was even more spectacular than the one from Tristan's apartment. But this home wasn't a gilded cage. It was a sanctuary filled with warmth, laughter, and Rowan's ever-expanding Lego creations. Annalise threw herself into launching the American arm of Vance Curations. Her reputation preceded her, and the New York art world, always hungry for the next big thing, welcomed her with open arms. She was featured in Art Forum and the New York Times Style magazine, not as a socialite, but as a formidable curator and businesswoman. She was Mrs. Annalise Thorne, now a name that carried its own weight, separate, but equal to her husband's. She moved in circles she had once only glimpsed from the outside, but now she did so as a peer, not a guest. She had managed for 6 wonderful months to avoid any contact with her past. The city was large, their circles close, but not yet intersecting. She knew, however, that a collision was inevitable. New York's elite society was a surprisingly small pond. The moment came on a crisp October evening. Alexander was being honored for his philanthropic work at the annual Guggenheim Museum Charity Gala, the pinnacle of the city's social calendar. Annalise stood beside him on the sweeping, iconic ramp of the museum, a vision in a deep emerald silk gown that shimmered under the gallery lights. She wore a simple but stunning necklace of diamonds and emeralds, a gift from Alexander, but her greatest accessory was the quiet, unshakable confidence she now wore like a second skin. She was engaged in a conversation with a museum trustee when a familiar voice cut through the polite murmur of the crowd. "The Davenport-Beaumont merger is finally showing real profit. It took years to stabilize, but Tristan is a genius at playing the long game." Annalise froze. The name Davenport was a key turning a lock in a room she had kept sealed for 7 years. She slowly turned her head, her heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat against her ribs. And there he was. Tristan Davenport stood not 20 feet away, holding a glass of champagne. He looked older. The boyish arrogance had hardened into a more severe, stressed handsomeness. There were fine lines around his eyes and a touch of gray at his temples. He was thinner, too, as if worn down by a constant grinding pressure. Beside him, clinging to his arm, was Genevieve. She was impeccably dressed, her beauty as sharp and cold as ever, but there was a brittle quality to her smile, a flicker of dissatisfaction in her eyes as she scanned the room. Annalise felt Alexander's hand gently touch the small of her back. "Are you all right, my love?" he murmured, sensing her sudden tension. She took a deep, steadying breath and gave him a small smile. "I'm fine." She was. The visceral, gut-wrenching pain she expected wasn't there. In its place was a strange clinical detachment, the feeling of looking at a faded photograph from a lifetime ago. It was Genevieve who saw her first. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of disbelief and confusion. She nudged Tristan, her painted nails digging into his forearm, and nodded discreetly in Annalise's direction. Tristan followed her gaze. His smile faltered. The champagne flute in his hand tilted slightly, a small drop of gold spilling onto the polished floor. His face went pale, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He was looking at a ghost. But this ghost was radiant, poised, and standing beside one of the most powerful men in the room. He saw Annalise, but he didn't see the broken girl he had dismissed from his penthouse. He saw a woman of immense grace and power, her name now Thorne, not Vance. He saw the way Alexander Thorne looked at her with a depth of love and admiration he had only ever feigned. The pieces clicked into place in his mind with sickening speed. Annalise Vance, the little artist he had paid to disappear, had returned as the bride of a billionaire. The world seemed to shrink, the noise of the gala fading into a dull roar in his ears. He couldn't breathe. It was impossible. He had erased her. He had paid for her to vanish, to become a footnote in a chapter he had brutally torn out of his life's book. Yet here she was, the main character in a story far grander than his own. Annalise held his gaze for a long, charged moment. She didn't offer a smile or a sneer. She gave him nothing but a cool, calm acknowledgement, a silent testament to the fact that he no longer had any power over her. Then, with a grace that felt like a physical blow to him, she turned back to her husband, linking her arm through his and laughing at something he said. The casual, dismissive elegance of the gesture was more potent than any confrontation could have been. It told him everything he needed to know. She had not just survived, she had triumphed. "Who is that with Alexander Thorne?" Tristan asked Genevieve, his voice a hoarse whisper, pretending he didn't know. "I have no idea," Genevieve lied, her voice tight with venom. "Some new wife he picked up in Europe. Let's go and say hello. It's important we make a good impression. Thorne's company is the one we need for the Hudson Yards green energy contract." The words hit Tristan like another wave of nausea. The Hudson Yards contract. The deal his company Davenport Holdings desperately needed to stay afloat after a series of disastrous investments. His professional salvation was tied to the new husband of the woman whose life he had tried to destroy. As Genevieve dragged him forward, Tristan felt like a man walking toward his own execution. The 20 feet between them felt like a mile-long journey across a frozen lake, the ice cracking with every step. "Alexander, wonderful to see you," Genevieve gushed, her smile wet and false, as they reached the couple. "And you must be his lovely wife. I'm Genevieve Davenport, and this is my husband, Tristan." Annalise turned her expression one of polite, mild curiosity, as if meeting them for the very first time. Alexander, ever the gentleman, made the introductions. "Genevieve Tristan, a pleasure. This is my wife, Annalise Thorne." Annalise. Tristan managed to say the name feeling like ash in his mouth. "A beautiful name." "Thank you, Mr. Davenport," Annalise replied, her voice smooth as silk, her eyes holding his. There was no recognition in them, no hint of their shared past. It was the polite, detached gaze of a stranger, and it was the cruelest cut of all. It told him that he was so insignificant to her now, that he wasn't even worth remembering. In that moment, under the soaring roof of the Guggenheim, surrounded by masterpieces of art and paragons of society, Tristan Davenport understood a terrifying truth. He hadn't erased Annalise Vance. He had, in his own callous, short-sighted way, created Annalise Thorne. And his past, which he thought he had buried and paid for, had just returned to haunt him in the most beautiful, powerful, and ruinous form he could ever have imagined. The gala was the first tremor of an earthquake that would shatter the foundations of Tristan's carefully constructed life. The image of Annalise, poised, powerful, and utterly indifferent to him, was burned into his mind. He went through the motions for the rest of the evening, his conversations hollow, his smiles strained. He felt Genevieve's sharp, questioning glances, but ignored them. His mind consumed by a single obsessive thought: how had the destitute artist he'd exiled to obscurity managed to land Alexander Thorne, a man whose net worth and influence dwarfed his own? It defied logic. It defied the natural order of the world as he understood it, a world where the powerful like him wrote the endings for the powerless like her. The drive back to their Upper East Side townhouse was thick with a tense, suffocating silence. Genevieve waited until the moment the door closed behind them before she rounded on him. "Don't you dare play dumb with me, Tristan!" she hissed, her voice a low, furious whisper. "Annalise Thorne, what in the hell is going on? That was your little art project, wasn't it? I don't know what you're talking about." He lied, loosening his bow tie, unable to meet her gaze. "Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about," she snapped, her composure cracking. "The girl you paid off 7 years ago. The one you swore was a nobody, a brief amusement. How does a nobody end up married to Alexander Thorne? Did you know she was back in New York?" "Of course not," he shot back, his frustration boiling over. "Do you think I would want this? Do you have any idea how catastrophic this could be? We need the Hudson Yards contract. Thorne Industries holds all the cards." His mention of the contract only fueled her fury. This is what happens when you're careless, Tristan. This is what happens when you can't control your appetites. Your past is never truly buried. I told you to be more thorough to make sure she was well and truly gone. The conversation revealed the ugly truth of their marriage. It wasn't a partnership built on love, but a merger of ambition and convenience now cracking under the first real sign of pressure. They were two co-conspirators whose crime had just walked back into their lives wearing emeralds and a billion-dollar name. In the days that followed, Tristan became a man possessed. He hired a private investigator, the best money could buy, to dig into Annalise's life since she had left New York. The report he received a week later read like a fairy tale he had unwittingly authored. It detailed her move to London, the birth of her son, Rowan, the slow, methodical creation of Vance Curations, and her eventual meeting with the reclusive Alexander Thorne. The investigator included photographs, Annalise pushing a laughing Rowan on a swing in a London park. Annalise confidently addressing a crowd at a gallery opening. Annalise and Alexander walking hand in hand in Paris, looking every bit the happy, devoted couple. But it was one detail that made Tristan's blood run cold. Rowan Vance, born 9 months after Annalise left New York. The report included a candid photo of the boy taken from a distance getting out of a car. He had Annalise's blonde hair, but his face, the set of his jaw, the shape of his eyes. It was like looking at a childhood photograph of himself. His son. She hadn't gotten rid of it. She had kept the baby. She had taken his money, defied his command, and raised his son in secret. A son who was now being raised by Alexander Thorne. The thought was a physical agony, a cocktail of rage, jealousy, and a strange, unfamiliar pang of loss. He had a son. A 7-year-old boy. He had never met a boy he had called a problem. When this new knowledge turned his obsession into a dangerous fixation, he started manufacturing reasons to cross paths with Thorn Industries. He arranged a preliminary meeting about the Hudson Yards project, a meeting he knew would be with Alexander's subordinates, but held a sliver of a hope that either Alexander or Annalise might appear. They didn't. He began driving past the grand building on Central Park West where they lived. He even followed her once at a distance as she left her Soho gallery. He watched as she hailed a cab, her movements confident and purposeful. There was no trace of the vulnerable girl he had known. He felt an ugly, possessive urge to confront her, to demand an explanation, to reclaim what he suddenly felt was his. His erratic behavior did not go unnoticed. At Davenport Holdings, his focus wavered. He was distracted in meetings, irritable with his staff. Their finances were already precarious, leveraged to the hilt after a few risky international developments had soured. The Hudson Yards contract wasn't just a desirable project. It was a lifeline they desperately needed to avoid defaulting on their loans. And the key to that lifeline was in the hands of the man raising his secret son. Genevieve, meanwhile, was consumed by her own brand of paranoia. She saw Annalise's return as a direct threat to her social standing and her marriage. She started subtly poisoning the well-dropping, carefully worded remarks to their mutual acquaintances. "It's so strange," she'd say over lunch at the Modern. "Alexander Thorne's new wife. She seems to have come out of nowhere. No real family to speak of. One has to wonder about her past." She painted Annalise as an operator, a gold digger, who had expertly ensnared a grieving, lonely billionaire. But her whispers had the opposite effect. Annalise Thorne was not some unknown quantity. She was a respected art curator with a thriving international business. Alexander Thorne was notoriously private and fiercely intelligent. The idea that he could be ensnared was laughable. Genevieve's attempts to smear Annalise only made her look petty and insecure. The pressure mounted. Tristan and Genevieve's arguments became more frequent, more venomous. The elegant facade of their life was crumbling, revealing the rot beneath. "You have to do something!" Genevieve shrieked at him one night after a society columnist had written a glowing piece about Annalise's impeccable taste and business savvy. "She's making a fool of us. Everyone is talking about her. This perfect, brilliant Mrs. Thorne. You need to remind her where she came from. You need to put her back in her place." "And how do you suggest I do that?" Tristan snarled. "March up to her and announce to the world that she's the mistress I discarded 7 years ago, and that her son is secretly mine. That would go over wonderfully for the Hudson Yards deal, wouldn't it?" The trap he had set for Annalise 7 years ago had finally sprung, but he was the one caught in its jaws. Any move he made would be self-destructive. To expose her would be to expose his own cruelty, his own secrets. To remain silent was to watch her thrive her happiness, a constant burning indictment of his own empty life. He was trapped, and his obsession grew with his powerlessness. He had to see her. He had to talk to her. He couldn't let it lie. He found out from a business contact that Alexander Thorne would be flying to Tokyo for a 3-day summit. Annalise would be in New York. Alone. It was his chance. He called her gallery, his heart hammering in his chest. When her assistant answered, he used a false name, claiming to be a private collector interested in a piece he knew she had recently acquired. He set an appointment. He was going to confront her. He didn't know what he would say, what he even wanted the outcome to be. He just knew he had to stand in front of her again, to break through the infuriating calm she projected and make her see him. It was a reckless, desperate move born from a crumbling empire and a shattered ego. And it would be the catalyst for the final devastating revelation. The Vance Curations Gallery in Soho was a testament to Annalise's success, a bright, minimalist space radiating taste and confidence. When Tristan walked in under a false name, he felt a pang of envy. She had built this herself. Annalise looked up from her desk, her professional smile vanishing into a look of weary disappointment upon seeing him. "You shouldn't be here, Tristan," she said, her voice even the desk, a clear barrier between them. "We need to talk," he insisted, letting the door click shut. "No, we don't," she replied calmly. "Everything was said 7 years ago." "I know about him, Annalise," he blurted out, abandoning any pretense. "I saw the investigator's report. I know about my son." A fierce, hot anger finally flashed in her eyes. "He is not your son," she corrected him, her voice turning to ice. "You forfeited that right when you called him a problem and tried to pay me to extinguish his life. He is my son." "He has my eyes," Tristan argued, stepping closer. "You can't deny it. You kept him from me." Annalise let out a sharp, mirthless laugh. "You, Tristan, are accusing me of lying, after you built a fantasy for me while planning your marriage to Genevieve. You don't get to claim any moral high ground. You didn't want a child. You wanted a clean slate. Do not stand here and pretend this is about paternal love. This is about your ego. You can't stand that I built a happy, successful life without you, and that my son is being raised by a better man." Every word was a perfectly aimed arrow. Stripped of his power, he made a desperate demand. "I want to see him. I have a right." "You have no rights," Annalise stated, her voice dangerously quiet. "You have a non-disclosure agreement you're currently violating. I suggest you leave before I call security." At that moment, the gallery door opened again. It was Alexander Thorne. He instantly took in the scene, Annalise defiant and fierce, Tristan agitated and pale. Alexander's calm, authoritative presence immediately shifted the power in the room. "Is there a problem here, my love?" he asked, his question clearly aimed at Tristan. "Mr. Davenport was just leaving," Annalise said. Cornered. Tristan stammered, "Thorne, I was admiring the art." "Were you?" Alexander replied, his tone laced with steel. "You made an appointment under a false name. That suggests your intentions are not about art." He moved to Annalise's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Defeated, Tristan turned to leave. In a final malicious act of spite, he turned back to Alexander. "You're a smart man, Thorne," he sneered. "You should ask your wife about her son. Ask her who his real father is." He hoped to plant a seed of doubt to crack their perfect union. The gambit failed spectacularly. Alexander didn't even look at Annalise. His calm, steady gaze remained fixed on Tristan. "I know everything I need to know about my wife," Alexander said, his voice quiet but absolute. "And I know that our son Rowan is lucky to have her as his mother." He paused. "Now get out of her gallery. If you ever approach my wife or my son again, you will discover just how quickly a business in need of a lifeline can drown." The unambiguous threat hung in the air. Tristan, utterly vanquished, stumbled out into the harsh city light. Annalise let out a shaky breath, tears of relief filling her eyes. "I should have told you everything," she whispered to her husband. Alexander gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "The details belong to you, Annalise. I married you for the woman you are." "He is Rowan's biological father," she confessed. "He paid me to disappear." Alexander pulled her into a firm embrace. "Then he is not a father," he said simply. "He is just a donor. I am the man who reads Rowan bedtime stories. I am his father in every way that matters. Tristan's spite had not created a rift. It had only revealed the unshakable foundation of the life Annalise had built, and the unwavering character of the man who now stood beside her. The aftermath of the confrontation was not loud, but brutally efficient. Alexander was a man who protected his family, and his response was decisive. Weeks later, a quiet press release announced that Thorne Industries had chosen a different partner for the Hudson Yards contract. For Tristan's over-leveraged company, it was a death blow. The loss of the deal triggered a catastrophic collapse. Investors fled, creditors called in their loans, and the Davenport empire, built over generations, crumbled into ruin under the weight of one man's past sins. Tristan's professional ruin was mirrored by a personal one. With the fortune and power gone, the transactional foundation of his marriage to Genevieve disintegrated. Their final days together were a maelstrom of bitter accusations, culminating in a divorce that saw them fighting over the scraps of their diminished legacy. Genevieve quickly distanced herself from the now toxic Davenport name, leaving Tristan utterly alone in the wreckage of the life he had so carefully constructed. Annalise watched the downfall from a distance, reading the headlines with a sense of detached closure rather than victorious glee. Her life was too full of present joy to dwell on past pains. Her victory wasn't in Tristan's ruin, but in her own happiness, a life built on a foundation of genuine love and respect. One crisp autumn afternoon, she sat on a bench in Central Park, watching Alexander and Rowan play. For the first time in years, she opened a sketchbook and began to draw them her family whole and happy. When Rowan climbed onto her lap and asked why she didn't paint anymore, the question unlocked something profound within her. Her old art had been intertwined with pain and a desperate need for validation. She didn't need that anymore. Looking at her husband and son, she realized it was time to begin again. She would paint, not to escape a tragic past, but to celebrate a vibrant present. Tristan Davenport had tried to buy her story and write a tragic ending for her. He had failed to understand that she was not a character in his narrative. She was the artist, and this new, brilliant, and joyful masterpiece was hers alone to create. The phoenix had not just risen, she had soared. Annalise Vance's story is a powerful testament to the idea that our lives are not defined by those who wrong us, but by how we choose to rebuild. She transformed betrayal into a catalyst for reinvention, proving that the deepest wounds can often lead to the greatest strengths. Her journey wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. She didn't seek to destroy the man who broke her heart, but instead focused on building a life so full and beautiful that his memory became an insignificant footnote. This is a story for anyone who has ever felt discarded or underestimated, a reminder that true power lies not in tearing others down, but in having the courage to construct your own happiness piece by magnificent piece. If Annalise's incredible journey from heartbreak to triumph resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need a story of hope and resilience. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories of justice, strength, and incredible transformations. Thank you for listening.